We focus on the challenges and the deficits, which are very, very real, but there are some phenomenal strengths with it. And unfortunately, the school system, for the most part, is not drawing those out of our children. But just because you struggle in a classroom does not mean that you are not intelligent, does not mean that you are not capable of achieving phenomenal things.
23 years I've been working in ADHD, and I've never heard anybody ask anybody else that question before. If you took school out of the equation, would you still have the problems that you're experiencing and those emotions that we're talking about? And the answer is no, I wouldn't.
I thought it was me. I thought I was failing as a parent. I thought that I was just this terrible mum because no matter what I did, I just couldn't seem to get things happening the way it seemed to be for everybody else.
Well, what we've been able to do in this environment is bring successful entrepreneurs, founders and business leaders, if you like, that are thriving and succeeding because they have actually harnessed their ADHD.
Support plus challenge equals resilience. And I just thought, that's it.
You've got to stop talking down ADHD. We've got to start bigging up ADHD. Accept the challenges, but look towards the future.
Claire Quigley Ward, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We've been really looking forward to this.
I'm excited to be here.
So you're the host and founder of All Aboard ADHD podcast. And what I love is it gives us an opportunity to talk about the parenting side of neurospicy kids, and you yourself are diagnosed ADHD with ADHD children. So it gives you that empathy and perspective to open up a conversation that's very relatable to me, recently diagnosed ADHD, and children that haven't been diagnosed yet, and the countless people you interact with.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, we look at you as a mum and we look at you as a podcast host, which all sounds really successful and really sweet. How did you get there?
A lot of hard work.
I suspected.
I mean, both personally as a mum of neurodivergent children, but also, you know, through my own journey as well. Like anything, it takes a huge amount of hard work. But my ADHD story began with my son. He was diagnosed, he's now 14. He was diagnosed when he was 6.5 back in 2017. And that really kind of catapulted me into a world that I wasn't expecting. Because in those days, I think we have this wealth of information available now, but ADHD was not on my radar. You know, when I eventually went to the GP seeking help, it was because I thought it was me. I thought I was failing as a parent. I thought that I was just this terrible mum because no matter what I did, I just couldn't seem to get things happening the way it seemed to be for everybody else. And it wasn't seeking a diagnosis that I went for, put it that way. And that really began my whole journey and has led me to where I am now.
So before, if I can, just a supplementary question. We talk about that started your journey, but truthfully, your journey started as a young girl anyway, didn't it? But it wasn't recognised as an ADHD journey. So although we'll focus on the parenting and the help you give to other parents, let's just set the scene for what it was like for you as the 6.5-year-old and then growing up. You know, here's your lad at 14 now. What was your period? What was that period like for you?
Oh, it's a good question. It's interesting, isn't it? Because when you start that period of self-discovery, so I was diagnosed at 41 as a result of the journey that I was on with my son. It's not an overnight thing. And I think I'm still learning about myself every single day, both in terms of things I do now that have, you know, never occurred to me before, and then reflecting back on my own childhood. Because I guess in many ways, I had no idea that the way I thought or felt was actually different, because you don't know inside other people's brains. It's going to sound like a really weird analogy, but I remember as a child vividly trying to figure out a system to understand what it was like to be colourblind. And I couldn't obviously wrap my head around it, but I kept coming up with all these ideas and thinking, no, that won't work. Just to try to understand what is it like to look through somebody's eyes where they can't see colour the way I can see it. And when I think about that now in relation to the difference in my own brain, I find it quite fascinating, because it was like I had this awareness maybe that actually everybody wasn't the same, and yet didn't realise that really in many ways I was probably seeking to understand the difference between me and other people.
That's empathy as well, right? Really early use of empathy. Like, how does other people feel? And actually bringing that forwards to And I really hit home when you said about other people feeling like they're failing as a mum, and I say other people that started with you feeling like that, but you have brought a community of 40,000 plus to your podcast, a community that, dare I say, were drawn to you because you put that out there and you were vulnerable and raw about that. And I want to open up that sort of empowerment you might have had and the revealing element of how many other people were clearly feeling like they were failing as a parent.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because I thought I was the only one.
Yeah, point.
At the beginning.
Was it quite overwhelming then?
It was so overwhelming. But that happened over a period of time. So, at this stage when my son was diagnosed, he was at a local all-through school, and they'd had a secondary school for a very long time. Then they opened the primary phase. So they were backfilling the school, which added, I think, to a degree of a sense of loneliness, because at that point he was only the second intake. They were backfilling it. And I just felt like I couldn't see the challenges that I was having, and all versions of him reflected back at me and other children. And obviously, I now know that couldn't possibly have been the case, but it felt like it. And he was just this amazing, amazing little boy with obviously bags of energy, but I felt so misunderstood. And a lot of my own responses in those early days was trying to reputation manage, because, they're little, they're learning to make friends, they're going on play dates, and I just so desperately didn't want him to struggle maybe in the same way that I did in certain circumstances. And so my way of coping with that was to be really open and vocal from day one. Like, I didn't hide it. I didn't want there to be any sense of shame. I wanted it to be something that he could own and understand, obviously in age-appropriate ways, because he was 6.5. And so I just spoke really openly and honestly. And what happened over a period of time is that slowly parents would approach me in the playground, either for themselves or on behalf of a friend. And then gradually that grew to the school signposting people to me. And eventually I live in Winchester, in that city, I realised, there's going to be way more than beyond our school community, and eventually led to me setting up ADHD Winchester, which is a local support group that I also run. And that's about 4 years old now, growing and thriving every single day. But even then, when I set that up, and we get together in person and we have a really active, supportive WhatsApp group too, I still have people saying, can I talk to you? Can we have a phone call? And then you start to realise that, people are joining this journey every single day, and they have the same questions, the same struggles. And I wanted to create a platform for which would allow me to share that information on a much wider scale with people across the UK, so that nobody felt as alone as I had. Because I don't think I could find the words to express how difficult a time that was.
So you've used words like loneliness, shame, and those are very, out of all of the words in the English language, those are the words you chose to describe how you felt at the time. Clearly the podcast is looking to remove those feelings for other people. What do you hear from other young mums about how they feel currently?
Oh, it's the heartache, because we all love our children, and our children are all amazing, and they are not broken, but they need to be misunderstood. And very sadly, as a function of the school system, often that's not the case. And one of the questions that I ask mums, it's usually mums, when I first meet them and they're telling me about their children, if you took school out of the equation, would you have a problem? And every single person says no. And I just think that's really heartbreaking, because we are fighting against an education system that's broken. It's not, the fault of most teachers, but it's a square peg round hole situation, and it just doesn't work. And not only does it not work, it destroys our kids in the process.
23 years I've been working in ADHD, and I've never heard anybody ask anybody else that question before. I think that's a really powerful question. I'm going to let that go without that being explored a bit more. If you took school out of the equation, would you still have the problems that you're experiencing and those emotions that we're talking about? And the answer is no, I wouldn't.
We've had Alex Partridge sit here, call them trauma factories.
Trauma factories. But the fact that you asked that question is inspirational, and it shows an exquisite empathy with what is actually going on within the home of every parent. And that's something we can pull out. So what's the answer?
Oh,
That's harsh.
That's a big one.
But you're in a position.
You have some ideas.
Yeah.
Well, no. I want to say harsh. That's what I wanted to ask, because you have a huge amount of information, and I guess almost data, and people coming to you with, and so kind of the question is actually you probably got a very sort of great perspective on what the major problems are that allow you to then actually go to a school or education minister and say, this is what needs to change. So that's where I'm coming from, is like, actually you could probably identify it better than others.
I think that in everything I do, I want to be part of the solution for sure, because we can sit here and these conversations are really, really important. They are, because they help raise awareness, which is absolutely a fundamental first step in all of this. But beyond that, I wanted to do something that actively helps and that actively gives parents the information that they need to understand this, because it's a really fascinating neurodiversity and so misunderstood. I mean, genuinely so. I think that we focus on the challenges and the deficits, which are very, very real, but there are some phenomenal strengths with it. And unfortunately, the school system, for the most part, is not drawing those out of our children. But just because you struggle in a classroom where you have to sit still and conform in a particular way does not mean that you are not intelligent, does not mean that you are not capable of achieving phenomenal things. And I felt like if I could begin that by sharing information from experts to help cut through the noise a little bit and give people sort of a credible source of information to begin laying that foundation, that was the first start. And then beyond that, I think it is the education system that needs to change, absolutely, for our children with ADHD and other neurodiversities. But you know what? Actually, for all children, yeah. Because all children have learning needs. And there's someone called Professor Joel Tolcott, who's at Aston University, and he's developed this project called the Universal Classroom. And it's about how do you ultimately move away from these individual diagnoses and start looking at it in terms of dimensions and realizing that all children have learning needs, and how do we change the way that we approach education, which is, I think, such a hopeful first step. I mean, I don't know the solution in terms of schools, but something has to change, because otherwise we run the risk of destroying these amazing brains that we actually need.
Well, we this is a key thing. You mentioned the experts, which is where you sit as well. But what we've been able to do in this environment is bring successful entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders, if you like, that are thriving and succeeding because they have actually harnessed their ADHD. But those same people were misunderstood, were in trouble at school, not for being bad, but for not being in attendance or not concentrating and just being distracted. And I haven't told you this yet. I had a meeting with the school that our oldest daughter goes to, who's 15, to have as an intelligent conversation as we could about the fact that she's not getting on with the school. She's doing things that are clearly signs of masking. And yet she's got that spark, that ADHD kind of, I want to get going in life, I want to make things happen. But she's feeling that she's been punished and doesn't fit in and is not welcome at the school. And we didn't come up with a solution, sat around the table with the head. If anything, she just empathized and said, thanks for your raw honesty and so on. Something needs to change. I don't know what it is.
Absolutely. When I asked you that question about what's the solution, you took your answer into switching between looking for the negative, looking for the impairment, and looking for the positives. And body language with you, I'm going to play it back. You'll see it when you see this. You came alive at that point. You sat differently. You looked at me differently, and you became alive. I want to go back to why that is, because you're a solutions-focused mum who's clearly focused on other mums trying to find their solutions. That's what makes you tick, isn't it? That's what brought you alive in that 100%. Question. Yeah, look, it's happening again. It's noticeable, isn't it?
100%.
And what I want to get to now is, how can the ecosystem that we're creating to remove the shame and change the narrative, how can the ecosystem that you're now part of, whether you like it or not, you're part of, how can we continue to capture that energy that you've got? And thousands and thousands of people want that energy. They may not know it. They may not know how to get to it, to actually be a force for good. Because we've got to stop talking down ADHD. We've got to start bigging ADHD, accept the challenges, but look towards the future. Your podcast, what does the podcast, two questions. First one is, what does the podcast give you?
Oh, I like that question. I love it. Like, I absolutely love it. And to begin with, when I recorded the first episode, which was just me talking on my own, the thing that gave me the courage is I just thought, well, if no one listens, it doesn't matter. I haven't lost anything. But just
self-therapy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just do it and put it out there. And I feel so fortunate that I get to do this every day because I'm learning. You know, I'm sitting there not as an expert, as a mum, genuinely interested in growing my awareness and understanding of ADHD all the time, and also being able to relate it back to my own children and my own life and myself. But more than anything, I think my mission is to help other parents on this journey feel less alone.
That's the second question. How alive do you feel when somebody gives you the feedback that you have helped them?
Oh, there's something really special about it when you get an email or a message, like a DM from someone where almost makes you feel a bit emotional, where you don't know them and you've done this just because one day in a very ADHD way you had an idea and thought, let's try it. And then you feel like you're helping people who are lost or struggling wherever they are. You know, obviously people are joining every day that's children that either are on that diagnosis journey or have had a diagnosis, but also people who are much further along, because it changes, doesn't it, as our children evolve. Like my son, what he needed at 6.5 is very different to what he needs now. And we're, you know, the ability to help them where they're at in that moment, giving that kind of credible evidence-based information, but also a sense of community. I think people just hearing that they're not on their own in this. And I have, as well as the expert episodes, I've got parent guests who share their kind of real life lived experience, and special guests who share their own ADHD story. And I think there's something really powerful in that, just hearing like, oh my God, I can relate to that. That happens to us in the morning as well. Because when there's no judgment and there's no fear of shame, then it can be funny. There can be humour and camaraderie in this shared world.
Community is everything. I mean, that whole empathy you've got and then being able to share it. Because at one time, and we've identified that in this conversation, you were so lonely, you were so alone, and clearly so many people still are. So credit to you that you've built a community where people know it's a safe space, but also they can learn. And as Phil's clearly picked up, and I have too, you know, you thrive on that. You know, you come alive with that, and that makes people feel they can talk more. And so, where's the kind of vision for the podcast? Is it a journey that you're just enjoying? Because ultimately, all you're doing is building a community that gets bigger and bigger, a tribe for people to come into, which is so valuable. You're learning all the time. Have you got an aspiration for it to achieve something or be somewhere?
The mission remains the same, and that is to help parents. And I think there's value in having, you know, a voice in the UK, because there's some amazing resources in the US, for example. But I think that's some feedback that I've had that really helps, because it is a podcast that's unique to parents. And it started as something I recorded and still record at home. I record remotely. It's an audio only podcast, you know, the only little bits of video I use are for short form content. And it's a completely self-funded, bootstrap passion project that came about just because I really wanted to help other people and I wanted to be part of a solution. And I would really hope, putting that out to the universe, that I could keep doing this, that I could grow it to a point where I could sit here doing what you guys are doing, like having a studio and reaching as many people as possible. Because this is not just for my kids. You know, this started as something that I was doing to help understand my son, and obviously my daughter, she's 9, she was diagnosed last year, in that process too. But this is not just for them. It was the same when I was advocating for him at school. I would say to the teachers when I would share resources or bits of information, this is not just for him. This is for every kid that ever comes through your school or your classroom, wherever you may end up teaching in your career, so that you just understand them a little bit more, and how we can change that. And then I also feel a huge sense of responsibility for this next generation, which is why I wanted my children to understand their brains from a really young age too, and feel proud of who they are. Because it's one thing to educate us as parents, but we have to educate the children too, so that when they are coming through and these solutions maybe exist or things have changed, that we are living in a much more inclusive world that actually celebrates neurodiversity and sees it such an important part of our lives.
Can we open that up? Because like you asked what needs to change. I've had the meeting with the school. Is there something that anyone watching or listening to this now as a parent that's really struggling, they know there's a community, they know there's a tribe they can come into and share and stuff. But is there one piece of advice you can flip back out where a mum struggling with ADHD children can do something to try and make their world better in terms of at home and how they interact with school as it is at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's two key things that I wish more people understood. And it very much, we mentioned this earlier, it's about understanding your child and meeting them where they're at that point. You know, there's nothing that needs fixing here. There is nothing that's broken. It's about understanding where they are and what they need. And two things in particular are the most profound elements for me. And the first one is interest, because I don't think people really understand how fundamental interest is to an ADHD brain. You know, without interest, you can't unlock motivation and passion. And it is one area where often you'll see teachers getting really confused because, I mean, this was my school reports, you can concentrate over here and you're really engaged over here. So what's the problem there? Yeah. And they just can't wrap their heads around that. And without that interest, there's no dopamine. So it's like, so how do we engage interest? How do we hook into someone's reward system in their brain? Because we all have to do things we don't want to sometimes. And that's fundamentally the first thing. And I think it's crucial to everything. Like, what's your child interested in? What gets them going? What do they respond to? And that's going to be different for everybody. And then how can we build that in, whether it's like systems at home or the way in which that we're incentivizing them in school, because the other element there linked to that at schools is this consequence detention system where we are punishing children for function of their brains. And it infuriates me.
You can feel the passion there.
So I asked you what the solution was. You said it was a harsh question. There's the answer. And I knew we'd get there. I want to spin something slightly differently, because what's coming out from you is very much, you can either take a pedestal and berate people for not getting this right, or you can go on a journey to try and bring people to a new level of understanding in a new place. And you're clearly in that group of bringing people with you. And that's applaudable. You're also, I believe, an ADHD coach.
Yeah.
And you put yourself out there to become a coach. Where did you go to get your coaching qualification?
So I trained with ADVOCA in the US, who are like the global leaders in ADHD coaching. And I've just recently been awarded my AACC with them, which I'm super proud of, because there's a lot of work that went into that. And I'm still training with them on their fundamentals for family coaching, because in line with the podcast and being a mum, I'm like really passionate about working with kids. And
I was going to make that link for you, if I may, just to explore. So you're running a podcast, you're bringing people with you, you're coaching people every minute of every day now, aren't you? Yeah. You know, you're going about it in that coaching way. What's the difference between a coach and somebody who shouts a lot to make change? Why become a coach?
Because a lot like I said with my own children, I want other people's kids to feel like they understand themselves. Because when we start to understand our brain, you know, why we face some of the challenges we do, but also crucially what our strengths are, then we can start to move forward with strategies that work for us. And that takes time, right? Particularly for children who have ever-evolving brains. It would be a change process in an adult. So it's going to take a long time in children, but that slowly over time, we start to see a child who's developing resilience and then the skills that they need to thrive ultimately and to be capable of what they're capable of achieving in life. But more than anything, because I want to help kids, I was going to say build self-esteem, maybe it's maintain self-esteem. You know, I remember saying to a teacher at school about my son, is that I wanted him to get through school with his self-esteem intact, which is, I mean, it's ludicrous that I even had to say that out loud, that was even a thing, because I could see what was happening to his self-worth as a result of how he was being treated or how he felt in a classroom environment. And that was work I had to do, rightly so. Obviously, I'm his mum outside of it. And I just thought, this doesn't work. Like, what are we doing to our children? And so with the kids that I coach too, it's very much about helping them build that awareness of their own natural strengths and celebrate the things when they do make progress, when something suddenly changes or they've achieved something, or just honestly, they've really enjoyed it and it's brought them joy. Because we have this negativity bias, right? All humans have it, but it's so prevalent in ADHD. And I struggle with this massively myself. So there is a pot kettle black thing here too. But you've got to catch yourself. And we have to, that pause that's so important in impulsivity, I think is also really important in starting to help our brains like rewire and build that evidence, that positive evidence of the things that we're good at and the things that go well.
You've just exposed something there. We're in a wrap up now. We're going to have to wrap up, but I'm not going to wrap up with that. It's just exploring this. You come over as being resilient. You've just exposed that actually you're still having to work hard for your own, I would determine it as resilience. And I think part of your mission is to help other people recognize the lack of resilience they have, but also how to get to being more. You can't tell someone to be resilient, can you? It's got to come from within. It's got to be heartfelt and it's got to be helped along the way. It's a very complex thing, resilience, isn't it? And I know you've talked about exploring your own journey and your resilience. And the knowledge you have now of your ADHD is helping with your resilience, isn't it?
100%.
And to what's going on. So you've got the podcast, you're a mum, you're helping families and you're helping yourself become more resilient over time. What's the key to helping people become resilient, do you think, in the coaching and everything that you do? Your podcast is a coaching podcast. It's not just an information podcast, is it? You're seeking to help people. So what's the key to that resilience goal, do you think?
I saw a quote the other day, and I think this is right. It was support plus challenge, or challenge plus support equals resilience. And then there was the opposite to that too. And I just thought, that's it. This is just about being understood, and it's just about being supported. That's how we develop resilience. You know, my son, he changed schools for year 9, and it's been a massive change for him. You know, it's taken him a long time to settle. Obviously, he's got ADHD. He's in an environment that is so much better for him now, and we're so fortunate for that. He's got the most amazing teacher. And when I came across this quote, I wrote it in the card for him at the end of the year, because I have no doubt that my son's success this year has been a team effort, you know, like us as parents. Him, ultimately, he's on the ground. He's the one who's enduring the challenges and the ups and downs, but also from him as my son's teacher, he's been so fundamental in that success. And I think resilience is something that you develop throughout your life. Maybe it never stops, because it's about having that support. And I think I am still building my own resilience. Like, I wish that I'd had this information for myself when I was younger. And I think that that's a journey that will probably never ever stop for me. And strangely, and I think you're so spot on when you ask that question, when I set up ADHD Winchester, someone I know said to me, I hope you're getting some support from it too. And I was like, oh God, that's such a good question. No, because not that the people in the group aren't amazing and they're incredibly supportive in that sense, but actually it was still something I was doing for other people. But a byproduct of all of this, I think, has been creating a support system for myself and my children, because it's the world that they're going to go out into, right? And I just felt like it wasn't enough to just be maybe changing some things at home or like having those conversations with the school, that I just wanted to do more for other children here in the UK.
It's fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
You're not lonely anymore, right? You've got 40,000 plus, and who knows what that would be seen. It's brilliant. What you're doing is inspirational.
Well, it's a shared passion, isn't it? It's a vocation right now. And it's funny, when I began this with my son's diagnosis, it sounds crazy to say it, but because it was such a whirlwind, I felt so separate to it. You know, this is going to sound ridiculous, but you get the diagnosis and you're like, oh, okay, that's it, is it? You know, done. And then you're like, nope, there's a long way to go. And over those years, now we've sort of absorbed each other. You know, now this is my life, and I'm really passionate about it, and I want to help.
Your passion comes through in spades. It's been brilliant to interview you and to think about the journey that you've been on. The key message here is about how you're building resilience for yourself and others. And I think that will come through really strongly in this program. And you're to be congratulated.
Thank you.
I once was at a conference, and the conference chair was a lady called Andrea Bilbo, who runs ADIS, one of the national advocacy services for ADHD. She's been in this game for 30 odd plus years. and she was awarded the OBE, and she closed. We made a big fuss of her OBE, and at the end of the conference, she says there are only 3 letters that matter to this huge audience. It's not OBE, it's MUM, and they're the people we should work with. And here you are, with those 3 letters after your name, and your passion, your empathy, your mission stands out, and you're to be congratulated on that. Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. That's it. It is just being a mum at the end of the day, isn't it? You know, I saw one final thing to share. I saw a thing recently, and it was that, you know, maybe this isn't true of all people, but it resonated with me that your mum is the one person on your journey who doesn't want anything from you. And I think that really sums it up for me. This is not for me.
No.
This is for my children, for other people's children.
You're an empath, and
A younger version of you, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So true.
Yeah, I feel that. No, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.